Good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our webinar today. My name is Brian, and for those of you who don't know about us, we are a government-owned organization in Singapore that invests in and helps build deep tech startups, talent, and communities. At SGInnovate, our work involves connecting with the global deep tech ecosystem, working with entrepreneurial scientists to bring their innovative research from lab to market, as well as developing deep tech talent. Today's event, Key Project Management Skills for a Pharma Industry Career, Masterclass Part 1, is presented by SGInnovate and the Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. Today, we have an amazing expert in this field who will be able to share more about the hard and soft components of project management, including project management careers, scoping projects, and more. I also like to encourage our audience here today to share their thoughts on this topic and engage with our speaker by using the Q&A box below. And now, with no further ado, I'll now pass the time over to Diana, who's the lead of corporate engagement at Albany College, who will be taking over the session today. Diana, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction. I appreciate it. I'm going to be bringing up my slides here. Can everybody see that all right?
Yep, that looks fine.
Okay, good. I want this to be very interactive, so please submit questions at any time into the chat box, and I will periodically scope them out and try to answer them the best that I can. So you're here to learn about some soft skills that are required for project management success in the pharma industry. And you may be wondering, why do we even need project management? Well, project management is a lot about managing all of the different processes that people are engaged in. And if you've ever worked on a project or on some sort of group effort, you probably can readily identify with this cartoon, which shows how different people who touch a project will look at the project very differently. So the customers, we start out here in the upper left-hand box with what the customer said that he or she needed, right? Whatever that was. I'm not going to walk you through all of these other cartoons, but you can see the project leader, the engineer, the programmer, the sales executive, documentation, operations, what they installed, what the customer was billed for, and then finally here, what the customer really needed. And note that there's a big gap, a big difference, right, between where we started out in the upper left-hand box and what the customer really needed. So project management is just a set of techniques that enables us to try to put a little more form and organization, if you will, to all of these disparate viewpoints. We need them all. We need the engineer, we need the sales executive, we certainly need the customer's involvement, but we need to have a way of keeping it organized and keeping it moving towards some goal. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about projects and project management. I'll give you a little few thoughts about project management in pharma in Singapore, and then give you some sense about careers in project management, what you might actually expect to make on average in Singapore as a project manager. And then I'll talk about 9 skills and or attributes that are going to be important for success as a project manager in the pharmaceutical sector globally. So you've already read my bio. I'm not going to walk you through all of the things that I've done. I do have this little graphic here, however, just to remind us all that no matter how well we plan a career or a project or a vacation or anything, we always will encounter some kind of unexpected twist or turn. So I would say that my career and being here tonight, or tonight where I am and in the morning where you are, was not something I would have predicted from an earlier day. But over time, I have learned how to manage these kinds of changes and these unexpected twists and turns. And I think I've actually been able to live a richer life and have a more interesting and more satisfying career as a result of that. Okay, but first, let's just get grounded in what is a project, because in the world of project management, there's a very specific definition of what a project is. So project sounds very simple, but the devil is in the details. A project has a start, a middle, and an end. So it is a constrained set of activities that have a specified deliverable or deliverables and that use finite resources. I'm not going to talk too much tonight about the finite resources, but they would be what you would expect: people, money, time, and the resource of deliverable descriptions, if you will, deliverable constraints. And we start out at the start, but of course, always along the way, we're getting new information, and that will modify how we are going to be managing the project. And it's in that kind of dynamic that you will see all of these characteristics will come in very handy to work through this dynamic. So I thought, well, I'll give you a couple of examples. I'm sure you can come up with things that are far more sophisticated than this, but we could, a project could be something as simple as going from Sentosa to the Singapore Zoo. I have never visited your beautiful country, although I have a dear colleague who worked for GM there for many years and always talked very highly of it. So if you wanted to do a bike ride over this, I think it's about 6 miles, I estimated, you'd have to think about your equipment, your bicycle. What are you going to eat along the way? Where will you stop? What will you do? How much will it cost? Who, are you going by yourself? Are you going with others, et cetera, et cetera? But that's a project, right? It has a start in Sentosa, it has an end in the Singapore Zoo, and then the middle is all of the stuff, the route that you're going to follow, how did you pick that route, et cetera. On a more professional level, and another example, and this is a very big area in the pharmaceutical industry for project management, and that is in the development and management of clinical trials, right? Again, I have a start, a middle, and an end point, and many, many, many different things happen along the way. I get new data all the time. I have to make changes perhaps, or I have to modify the plan on a regular basis in order to achieve my goal. So start, middle, and end, generally it's not open-ended. So lots of jobs. I try to think of some examples. So if you're many people who are in the health field, dentists, physicians, nurses, they do what I call process over and over again. They see a lot of patients every day. They do a lot of the same activities every day. Nothing ever necessarily starts and nothing necessarily ever ends. Certainly an encounter with the patient starts and ends, but I don't necessarily have to change anything, right? I'm not trying to develop something new, which is generally what project management is involved with. So start, middle, and end, but actually when you are organizing a project, and again, we'll talk more about this in the second part of this series, which is coming up in a few weeks, you would start at the end and work your way backwards to think about what are all the steps that I need to take in order to make my project successful. So if I go back to my very simplistic example of the bicycle trip, I would start at the Singapore Zoo and work my way backwards to Sentosa, thinking about all the stops or all the things that I had to do. Is there a bridge? Is there a toll? Is there some place I could get my tires, the air in my tires, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to think about that and work it that way rather than saying, oh, well, what happens next? Because that's not a really good way to manage a project. Okay. The great granddaddy of all project management throughout the globe is the Project Management Institute. And they have something called the PMBOK, or the project management book of knowledge. And it contains all of the tried and true steps that professional project managers follow in order to be successful in their work. I'm not going to go through all this detail this time. I'm going to save this for another time. The point of this slide is basically to say that as you go through these 5 phases of project management, from initiate all the way through closing your project, you will find that certain types of skills are more helpful than others, right? So I'm going to talk about these skills and attributes in a minute, but know that sometimes you will use some more and other times you will use them less. And it doesn't mean that you have to have every one of these skills or attributes in order to be successful. It's just to give you a sense of what do the pros in the pharmaceutical industry, what are they like? What do they depend upon in order to be successful in achieving the goals of their team? I'm going to stop here and see if there nothing in the chat box yet. Okay. Don't be shy if you have questions. So let's talk about pharma, the pharmaceutical industry. Project management the pharmaceutical industry is what we would call a heavy user of project management. You will find this strategy, the strategy of managing a project, throughout any pharmaceutical company, starting with R&D, right? There are project managers who focus specifically on discovery, develop basic research and discovery. Going into clinical, when we go into man, so this would generally take us through animal studies up into first in man, and then the clinical trials, which can last for many years, are very expensive and are complex, definitely need the structure and the discipline of project management in order to be successful. But likewise, if you're dealing with the regulatory affairs, this is my attempt at a regulatory affair icon, you need to understand the agencies. I was listening to one of the commercials that were playing prior to the start of this talk, and I heard one of your leaders talking about the need to understand regulations all over the globe if you were going to be launching a global product. Well, that's a complicated thing. What the FDA says versus what the Singapore FDA says versus what the EMA requires. These are activities, submission of documentation, submission of data, management of trials, and dealing with the agencies as you are managing your trials. These are all start, middle, and ends that need a tremendous amount of sophisticated oversight. Manufacturing, supply chain, sales, all of these employ project managers, and project management ease is often thought of as the language of the pharmaceutical industry. So if you're interested in a project management role and you're interested in the pharmaceutical industry, you're going in the right direction. It doesn't matter what type of company or organization is of interest to you within the world of pharma, because project management comes up in all of these different cases. So certainly for existing companies, Abbott, Pfizer, Amgen, Johnson & Johnson, these all employ hundreds of thousands of project managers for different roles. But startups, in a startup, you may not have a dedicated project manager, but all of the people who wear all those hats have to be able to manage their projects successfully, especially on a shoestring, right? So they're going to use project management in the way that suits their particular needs at that particular time. Suppliers, don't forget, there are tons and tons and tons of suppliers, and the pharma ecosystem is very deep in terms of all of the different organizations that support companies. You see the companies hovering on the surface, but if you go under the iceberg, if you will, there are contract development and manufacturing organizations, contract research organizations, various types of analytical labs, et cetera, and they all hire and need project managers. And in fact, I would argue that the supplier project manager needs to be able to understand not only his or her own company and how they do their business, but also understand their clients, the existing companies or a startup. So everybody needs project management talent, and these are just some of the examples of titles that you might run across if you're doing job searches. There's lots more that are out there. I wasn't going to do a whole big boring list, but just to give you a sense about how many people work in this industry, at least in the US, there are about 630,000. Not all of those are in pharma, of course. They're in automotive, they're in finance, they're in software. Software is also a very heavy user of project management. I noticed as well that there was a lot of discussion about tech and the importance of tech in the promos that we're running about Singapore before we started this webinar. So a little bit about project management in Singapore. You all are probably far more sophisticated about this than I am, but I thought it would be helpful just to point out a couple of things. So the Project Management Institute is here. You can go to their website. You can see the URL there. And I would encourage you to go there if you have not done so yet, and become familiar with it. Check it out. See what kinds of things they do. You know, they have, you can volunteer, of course, which is one way of getting your feet wet if that's something of interest to you. They have all kinds of interest groups. They have symposia, webinars, things of that nature. So it's a really great resource for people who are interested in project management. And of course, you can become a certified PMP or project management professional. For many companies, this is a very important credential to have for project management career. Not every company will require it, but for some, it's important to have. And PMI is the grantor of those kinds of credentials. There's a whole series of them, with PMP being kind of the one at the top of the heap, the PhD, I guess you could say. I thought, well, I'll try to find a couple of job examples for project managers. This is from the Abbott Singapore job board, and you'll see they've got this one happens to, I thought this was interesting. This is Tech Ops and Business Development, where, as I said earlier, project management appears in all kinds of roles within a pharmaceutical company. And then off the SGI website, I found another few examples of project management jobs. I don't know what the pay is, but speaking of pay, in case you're wondering about that, so our friends at the Project Management Institute do an annual salary survey. And I just picked this up the other day. It's the most recent one. And you can see, there's lots of other countries underneath Japan, but I thought that this would probably be illustrative enough. So in Singapore, project managers, the average, of course, can make about $75,000, which is pretty good. Pretty good. The average is higher than in Japan. So if that's of interest to you, then keep that in mind. This is the average salary. As you proceed in your career, of course, you will be in line for additional amounts of money. Okay, so let's turn to the main topic for tonight. And that's the question that I'm asking here that we will talk about. Before I launch into this, does anybody have any questions? Let me see. I have nothing in chat. Okay. So I've got 9 things here. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on each one, but I do want to try to explain why I included this particular skill or attribute and what it means for project management. So everything from communication skills all the way down through resilience and lots of other stuff in between. I'll just let you take a quick look at that before I move on to the next slide. Okay, so let's take the first one. And as I said earlier, remember our little set of cartoons about what everybody thought the project was about. So somebody needs to organize all these people and get them headed in the same direction, right? And that's what project management is. So project management is basic, as at its most basic, a very large organizing strategy, right? So organizational skill is important for a project manager. It doesn't mean that if you are disorganized today, you cannot become organized. I know lots of people who were graduate students and lived a kind of graduate student life, moving quickly from one thing to another and being disorganized. But as they got into project management roles, junior roles at first, and then more advanced roles, they became very adept at organizing. So but the question you want to ask yourself is, do you have a place for everything? And do you always put everything back in its place? Do you have ways of classifying people, items, actions, times, experiences, whatever? Doesn't mean that you're classifying them in any negative way, but that, my friends all have this in common. I always eat these kinds of foods on Saturday morning, et cetera, et cetera. So do you tend to try to classify the world, if you will? Time is one of the key limited. Remember, I talked earlier about the finite resources that project managers used in order to achieve their goal. Time is one of the most finite of those resources. So you need to have a conscientious sense of time. You respect a deadline. You recognize how long it takes to complete certain tasks. And do you like to kind of wash away ambiguity, get the fog kind of moved apart. Now I see we have something in the chat box. Hi, for business development roles and innovation, focusing on development of new solutions, what level of project management knowledge can I build up on? So it will depend. That's a very good question. Thank you, Wei, for submitting it. I would say that it will depend on the company. Ironically, the smaller the company and the more of a startup it is, the more you will need to be a veteran project manager, because startups generally want to have people who have experienced lots of situations, have launched lots of drugs, or have been involved with lots of drug failures, et cetera. So they will tend to hire people or want people to be much more advanced in their skill set. Whereas if you were starting out with a large pharma, which has a lot of project management experience spread around the organization, and they're used to bringing on newer people who have limited experience, then you could go right in with perhaps some examples of projects that you've managed. If you've managed projects in school, then those kinds of things can be very helpful in making the case for you to be hired. And then you can march up through the company ranks in order to work your way up to a higher level. And then eventually, if you think that the startup world is for you, then you could go over to a startup or a smaller company. Business development as well, even within a large pharma that welcomes more junior people, business development is often the bailiwick of more experienced people. Not really sure exactly if I could explain it to you very well, but I think it's because you're dealing with licensing, out licensing, and in licensing, intellectual property, things that are sort of at the basic skeleton of the company. Companies are often reserving those kinds of jobs for more experienced people. Doesn't mean you can't eventually work into it, but I would say if you asked me how I would start out as a junior project manager within a pharmaceutical company, I'd pick a function like clinical development, even project management within the R&D function. Those are often more accepting of junior people? Here's another question. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, just, come back at me. Hello, which method, Scrum, Kanban, Agile, or Waterfall, should be used in which situation in the pharma industry? This is a very good question. So Agile, Waterfall, Scrum, these are all variants of project management. Generally, remember I said the PMI has the PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge. So that's sort of as I said, the great granddaddy of project management, and they've been doing this a long time, and they have their ways of doing everything. Lots of people over the years, however, have said, well, we have a better way of doing it because our company requires us to move much more quickly. So we can't always wait for the kind of data that we might need in traditional project management. We can't always necessarily go through all of those 5 phases in that particular order that PMI has laid out since time immemorial. So I would say it would depend on the company. Every company is going to have its own particular flavor. I think that Agile, I think any of them, frankly, if you have that skill, if you have some experience in that, that's going to go a long way to helping you in landing a job in pharma in project management. But it's very difficult for me to say which is going to be the most helpful for a given company. Really, those would be the kinds of questions that I would want to ask during an interview. Hi, Diana, may I ask your opinion on how to set up the project management system culture in a startup company as the first project manager? So it's a good question too. You all have wonderful questions tonight. So let's go back to our first principles, right? Let's set it up. Let's setting up project management as a project. So I would want to first identify my end, right? My goal, and that is what should the project management system at this startup look like? Startup is probably going to be loose, quick, not heavy on detail. So you'd want to have a type of project management, Agile, Scrum, for example, might be models. You don't have to follow them word for word, but they could be models for you as a way to do quick turnaround, but keeping a project moving. I would probably pick one department or one function within the company. So let's say that everybody is concentrating on getting the molecule tested, right? So, a lot of times companies license something in, startups license something in, they've got an asset, and their first order of business for, say, the first 6 to 12 months is to advance the molecule, right? Make sure it can get it past the bench into animal testing and then ultimately into human. So that's like the main action of a small company. And I wouldn't focus on that for my project management development. I would go with something like market landscaping. I might go with marketing, or I might go with competitive intelligence, something that I can kind of focus around over here without messing up or getting involved with the main action of the company. And then once I have proven success in my market landscaping, let's say, or in identifying part of future potential commercial partners, which can be part of what you do, then I can come back to my colleagues and say, look, here's how it's worked very successfully over here. Now I'd like to apply these same techniques to how we're managing this molecule. I hope that helped. What differentiates PMI from other PM associations in terms of compliance and recognition? In terms of, well, let me back up and make sure that I'm not misleading you. In terms of compliance, the main compliance for PMI is really in, frankly, passing the test in order to be certified. So we could go on for many webinars about that. But you have to learn how PMI thinks about project management if you want to be certified by them and if you want to pass the test. That's where compliance mostly comes in. the 5 phases of project management and all the other stuff that the PMI does is think of it as almost as a trade association, right? They're there to try to help. They're there as a service to members. In terms of so compliance is pretty low. In terms of recognition, PMI is still probably the most recognized organization. There are certainly smaller organizations around country by country, but they don't really have the history and the membership, frankly. So PMI has hundreds of thousands of members around the world, and so it has a lot of clout, I guess you would say. So especially if you are newer to project management and you are trying to get yourself established, PMP from PMI, anything from PMI is going to be much more recognizable and to have more credibility than something from a smaller organization. Not to say that you shouldn't join other types of organizations or at least investigate them. But Pharma has within the pharmaceutical sector itself, there are a variety of sort of smaller organizations focused on different things. And you can do both, right? You can be a member of this smaller organization as well as have your credentials and learn the ways of PMI. Okay, so how should we build up project management skills from scratch and get certification? Do you happen to have any advice for people who are quite new in the field? So let me take this in 2 parts. I gotta keep the question open here. So pardon me if I'm not looking at the camera directly every time. So how should we build up project management skills from scratch? So you all probably manage a lot more projects than you think you do. As I said earlier, a project can be something as simple as what you do on the weekend or something that you do on your vacation. You've probably been involved with many projects in your academic careers. You've probably worked with a team of other students on some sort of research project or on even a project for your sports team. So the first thing is to think about sort of inventory, if you will, whatever it is that you've already done in terms of managing projects. Throwing a party, cooking a meal rather. These all can be thought of as projects. Building a house for your cat. Anyway, so think about that first, and then what I would do if I wanted to kind of go the next step, I would try to get involved with project management, the PMI of Singapore, become a volunteer, attend one of their events, go over there and learn what they do, and start listening to people, learning about project management, networking with them, and that will help a lot in terms of sort of giving you the lingo, giving you a better appreciation of the concepts behind project management. Now, as far as certification is concerned, then you sort of go up to another step, right? So my advice is that you want to take some sort of formal training. Now, there's lots of formal training out there. Many organizations offer it, and it's good to take this kind of training because it will help you understand how the test questions are asked. I'm just going to be very candid about it. You need to understand how to answer the questions in order to get enough knowledge in your head to pass the test. So there are junior certifications that require, I think, like maybe like 1,000 hours of experience, but they can be very lenient in terms of how many hours of experience they accept. PMP, I think at least in the old days, I think it was like about 4,000 hours of experience over a year or two. But there's lots of ways that you can use academic experience, volunteer experience. If you volunteer at a hospital or volunteer anywhere, those things may be eligible to be counted as hours for project management. And then I would just continue to build on it in that way. I don't know if your university has project management courses. Some universities offer these. There's certainly plenty of courses on project management online that are economically priced, and could be viewed at your convenience. But I would first of all take an inventory of what I've done, and then go over to Project Management Institute of Singapore and start getting involved with them. Great questions. So organization is an important skill. If you don't have organizational skills today, doesn't mean that you cannot be a project manager, but it's certainly something to start thinking about if this is a career that is of interest to you. Let me go on here. Where am I? Okay, second skill that I want to talk about is resilience, or attribute. I think this is actually an attribute. You have to keep in mind that things don't always go the way you expect they will. Bad things happen, and the project manager, whether you are the official team leader or just a team member, the professional project manager works to figure out a way to manage the problem. I can't put it any simpler than that. So you may have to make difficult decisions. For example, maybe one of your team members is not pulling his or her weight. So you may have to go and have a heart-to-heart talk with this individual. That may not be particularly pleasant, but you know that you have to do it because the success of the project will hinge upon that individual continuing to perform. It's not that you don't ever have any challenges, because we all have challenges in every day of our lives, right? But it's, can you rebound from them? The project goes on, right? The project needs to go start, middle to end. And so the project manager is the engine, if you will, that keeps things moving and solves problems along the way, and doesn't let problems derail the progress of everyone of the project. Okay. I have another. So hi, Diana. As I understand it, PM certification is a general course, but pharma specific project management experience is usually obtained on the job itself. Yes, Sashi, that's exactly correct. Yes, PMP, project management professional certification, can be used in, is recognized by every industry, aircraft, airlines, retail, pharma, etc. But the way to build up specific pharma experience, pharma project management experience, is by working in a pharmaceutical company. Now there are, and I can try to locate these organizations. As I said, project management is very popular within pharma. And so there are sort of subgroups, if you will, interest groups, think of it that way, within pharma for project managers. Like, the project I used to be involved in when I lived in California, I was very involved with an organization of project managers in San Diego called, that was the pharma, that was involved with pharma in San Diego. And so they had specific webinars and meetings and conferences and things of that nature, dealing with the pharmaceutical industry and aspects of it that project managers working in the industry needed to know about. So I'll try to locate some of those examples for you to show you the difference. But in general, PMP is general, and experience within pharma is what you need in order to be a pharma project manager. Oops. All right. Decision-making ability. This is very closely related to, certainly to resilience, but also to organization, right? So project is just a series of decisions followed by more decisions, right? You'll notice here, I've got this decision tree starting at the end, right, with my goal. And I may have two approaches in this little example. We've just got two approaches, but we have to decide, right? Am I going to go approach A or approach B? And if I go A, action A1, A2, et cetera, et cetera. And I could take this all the way out for 3 years if I had to, right? But you have to be able to make decisions. You want to use the data that is available to you, but sometimes you have to make a decision based on the 70% rule, right? Does anybody know what the 70% rule is? Well, it means I never have 100% certainty. I never have 100% of all the data I could use in order to make a perfect decision. So I've just got to go with what I've got. But this is an important skill for project managers because a lot of what you do on a daily basis is make decisions or help others make decisions and help everybody stick with the decisions that they have made. So decision-making ability is a really good skill to have, as is flexibility, right? So talked about information coming to the project team throughout the course of the project, and that information may change the direction of the project. I've seen this happen many, many times in which we thought we were going over here, and then one of our very own milestones that we achieved said, no, you really need to be making a right-hand turn and pursue this goal or this interim deliverable. So you have to be resilient, but you also need to be flexible so that you can change what needs to change in order to keep the project on track. There are very few constants that you will discover. The more you get into project management, the more you will discover that part of the reason we have all of this sort of infrastructure and organizational firepower is because there are very few constants, right? And I'm trying to sort of rein everything in as we go through time. Leadership. You can't be a good project manager if you lack leadership skills. Doesn't mean you have to have them today in order to become a successful project manager, but you need to be able to make a decision, take a stand, perhaps do something that others do not agree with, but that's what being a leader means, right? It certainly has plenty of rewards. People look up to you. There are financial and promotional rewards that go along with being a leader, but it has its costs, right? Sometimes leadership can be very, very lonely. You're the one who, the buck stops here. As one of our former presidents, Harry Truman, always used to say, the leader has to say, okay, here's what we're going to do, even if it's a very unpopular kind of a decision. Focus. This is, to me, all of the other skills and attributes pale in terms of focus. You have to really be able to focus on that goal. What are you trying to do? What is the drug you're trying to launch? What is the result you're trying to get in your clinical trial? What is it that you want to have happen when you get to the zoo in Singapore? What is the goal? Why are you doing this? What is the outcome that you are working toward? And you have to be focused on that to the greatest extent possible. Ability to motivate. Now, this is a very important one for project managers, and I'll say I want to point out the very bottom, the bottom bullet, which is the main reason that the ability to motivate is so important. As a project manager, even if you are a project team leader, you are likely to not have managerial authority over all of the people on your team, right? So a lot of times companies will organize interdisciplinary teams of people, somebody from manufacturing, somebody from clinical, somebody from marketing, somebody from regulatory, put them all together on a team. And they are there to contribute their particular set of skills towards this project that keeps moving forward in time. But you as the project manager or you as the project lead, you have no say, or you're not their supervisor, you're not their boss. So you need to develop the ability to motivate them, right? The woman from manufacturing, she's so busy. The last thing she wants to do is be on your team. So how are you going to get her to do what you need her to do in order for the project to be successful? So you've got to learn how to motivate her. You've got to understand. We're going to go back now, and I'm going to contradict myself what I said in that very first little cartoon slide, the 15 or the 10 or so cartoons about what people think of when they look at a project. But you need to understand all those people. You need to understand that engineer. You need to understand why operations only, put a little rope hanging down from the branch of the tree. You need to understand all of them and then figure out what's going to catalyze them, what's going to spark them, what's going to make them enthusiastic. And the only thing they want to do in the world is work on your project, right? So the ability to motivate is a key tool in your project management toolbox. Communication. It sounds very trite. It sounds like, oh, not communication again, but you got to really be an effective communicator. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be flashy, but you need to get your points across and make sure that they have gotten across. I like the GACS principle. I think every communication should have a goal. Why am I telling you this? Am I telling you this simply to update you? Am I telling you this to motivate you? Am I telling you this, so that you can get me more information? Why am I talking? Why am I writing you a text? Why am I sending you an email? Who is my audience? For my immediate team, I'm going to have a certain way that I communicate. For my broader team, for my broader stakeholder group, for the FDA, for upper management, for all of these different audiences, I need to know how I'm supposed to be talking to them. I need to understand what I want them to do, how I want them to understand the situation. So I have to think about my audience, and I have to think of the channel. If I'm doing something that's, a fairly informal update, like, we're doing a stand-up team meeting every Monday morning, my channel is standing up in the conference room, right? It's just easy flowing, give and take. But if I'm doing a formal presentation to senior management to try to get more money for my project, then my channel is going to be much more formal. I'm going to have slides. I'm going to have a lot of data. I'm going to I'm going to match my channel to my audience and to my goal. And then finally, my style of communication. Am I going to be informal? Am I going to be formal? Am I going to be brief? Am I going to be very heavy in terms of data, for example? And this applies whether you're writing something or whether you're speaking something. So you want to always think of the GACS principle when you are considering how you're going to communicate. Negotiation. As I said before, you are the leader, of course, and you are in charge. You've got to be resilient. You've got to get the project on track. But sometimes it's going to come down to negotiating with someone or someones. And can you do that? Doesn't mean you have to be able to negotiate your way out of a problem right now, but it's a skill that you're going to find is very handy to have as a project manager. So you can't deliver the data on phase 2 for another 2 weeks. So let's figure out some other thing we can do in the interim, because I've got to go to senior management tomorrow with an update. Typical kind of problem that a project manager might face, right? So you want to make sure that you've got all the parties, all the involved parties involved in the negotiation. You're not just negotiating with one or two people. You want to do it as a group thing, because you're going to find that people will buy into whatever is the negotiated agreement, right? So, and you want to find a win for all parties. So your poor clinical development representative on the team is tremendously overworked and has had a problem in Cincinnati or Tokyo with a trial. So there's nothing else that you're going to get. You're not going to get your information today. But you want to try to figure out a way that that person can give you the information in the shortest amount of time, but not lose his job because he dropped the ball in Tokyo. So BOTNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Keep in mind what the where the parties are going to go. This is the original position, right? In a negotiation. I'm here, you're here, and we want to try to come together this way. But I want to see if I can at least bring us a little closer, right? This is the best alternative. I started out here, we're that far apart. I hope you can see my hands. And now all I can do is here, but that's better than going back to where we originally were. And then always confirm the negotiated position. I can't tell you how many times I've observed or been involved with, sad to say, negotiations where we all shook hands at the end and everybody left the room and then nobody remembered what they agreed on, or they helpfully forgot what they had agreed on. So negotiation skill is very important for project managers. All right, we got a chat question here. Okay. How am I doing on time, by the way, Brian? I can't see a clock.
Oh, we have around 9 minutes left.
9 minutes to go? Okay, good. All right. So other questions or comments about skills and attributes, soft skills and attributes that are important for project management success? Okay, you can think about that. And I wanted to just give you a couple of other thoughts about resilience. Have you ever heard of the expression forming, storming, norming, and performing? Has anybody here ever heard of that? Well, this actually was something that was developed or identified back in the 1960s by this guy, Bruce Tuckman. And here's the sort of summary of it. If you understand how groups develop, over time, you can be more effective in terms of getting them to do whatever it is that they need to do. So as I said earlier, project management, whether in pharma or another sector or another industry, is really about teams, how teams operate, how teams are managed, how teams perform, etc. So this concept of forming, storming, norming, and performing is very, very applicable within project management. And according to this guy, Bruce Tuckman, groups move through 4 behavior stages, forming, storming, norming, performing. And you can pretty much just, tell when you entered a stage, but it's hard to know when you have exited the stage. So let's talk about stage 1, forming. That's sort of the easy part, right? We're all coming together. We're focused on the work. We're very polite. We're full of energy for the most part. I mean, you're always going to have some people who really would like to be a lot of other places than there in your team meeting. But for the most part, getting together, getting oriented, kind of just, getting introduced to each other, that's the easy part. And, for project management at the start, during the initiation phase of project management, these, forming correlates very well with those stages. But we, of course, are going to move from forming to storming. And if any of you have ever worked in a project team or served on a sports team or have done anything with a group, you know that over time, if people stop being polite and they start clashing. So this stage, and I can't tell you how long it takes to go from forming to storming, This is where your ability to negotiate, your ability to be a leader, your ability to be a decision maker, your ability to be resilient, to be flexible, etc., is it very important, because people are now focused on each other and not on the task at hand. And this often happens once we get to the stage of a project where we're talking about budget, right? I think I need more money for clinical than you need in manufacturing, schedule, et cetera, et cetera. We do move eventually. So it doesn't seem like it always, but we do move from storming to norming, or the team just goes kaput. So this is sort of the realism. Realism sets in. I hate you, but I hate losing my job more. And we all have to agree that we're going to work together and not kill each other. There's lots of things that happen during this phase, but this often correlates once we've gotten into what I would call sort of maybe later parts, not later in terms of timing, but sort of more sophisticated or more mature periods of the project, or of the project plan anyway. And then finally, we get into number 4, the 4th stage, which is performing, and the project works like a well-tuned machine. So the team is delivering, the team becomes much more self-managing. So the interventions, become less and less over time. And it's helpful to keep in mind forming, storming, norming, and performing as you think about how projects actually run. So performing often correlates with quality, and quality is another constraint on every project. So some say adjourning follows performing, whatever it is. In project management ease, we always have a formal close to every project. And we can talk more about that when we get into the hard skills in a few weeks. So this is just a little preview of what I'm going to be talking about during that period. And I'm open for more questions. Here is my email address. If anybody has additional questions or you want additional information, don't hesitate to contact me. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Brian.
For that, Diana. Thank you so much for the insightful and knowledgeable discussion and the presentation, of course. I think I can speak on SGInnovate's behalf to say that it was a pleasure to have an expert like yourself here today to share your insights on such an important topic. Thank you to all our audience as well for submitting your questions and for engaging with us. Do note that this session is part 1 of 2, with part 2 of this masterclass held on the 4th of October at the same time. So if you enjoyed this session, do feel free to sign up for that too. For our audience today, do also take note that we'll be sending out a link to the recording for this session in our bi-weekly webinar, in our bi-weekly newsletter, I'm sorry. So do keep an eye out for that. And with that, we've come to the end of our webinar today. Thank you all for spending your Thursday morning with us. And on behalf of SGInnovate, I would like to wish you all a great week ahead, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next event. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much again, Diana.
Bye.